Today, we're diving deep into the story of Adrammelech, a really fascinating figure from the annals of demonology. And this is a wild tale of how a once mighty sun god got twisted and remade into a prince of hell. It's a journey that all kicks off with one single shocking accusation. Yeah, just let that sink in for a second. This one absolutely terrifying line from the Old Testament basically became the cornerstone for a reputation that has lasted for thousands of years. It paints this brutal picture of a deity who demands the most unthinkable sacrifice imaginable.
So that's the big question, isn't it? Who exactly is this entity? And how in the world did his name get so wrapped up in one of the most condemned practices in all of history? Well, the truth is a really complex, fascinating trip through belief, propaganda, and time itself.
Okay, so if you fast forward to the medieval grimoires, Adrammelech is a major player. We're talking about the great president of Hell's Senate, the grand chancellor of the Order of the Fly, which, sounds pretty sinister. He commands 30 legions of demons, a seriously high-ranking, powerful prince in the infernal court. But where did this whole demonic resume even come from? To get that, we have to rewind all the way back to the source, that single biblical text that basically sealed his fate for the next couple of millennia. And that's really the heart of it. This entire demonic legacy, this incredibly detailed profile of a prince of hell, it all sprouts from that one damning line in the Book of Kings, an accusation so powerful it completely defined him for centuries to come. Now, this wasn't happening in a vacuum. You've got the Assyrian Empire conquering everything in sight and literally moving entire populations around. So the biblical authors are describing the gods of these new neighbors, these foreigners, and they're framing their gods, like Adrammelech, as alien, and their rituals as just abhorrent. It's a classic us versus them situation written by the victors. And, the story didn't just stop there. It got worse. Leader commentaries, like you see in the Babylonian Talmud, they just amplified the horror. They added this chilling little detail that it wasn't just any children. Oh no, it was specifically the firstborn who were demanded for the fire. But hold on. This is where the story takes a really sharp, completely unexpected turn. We've met the demon. So now, let's pull back the curtain and meet the god he used to be. See, before that biblical accusation, way before the grimoires and demonic ranks were ever written down, Adrammelech was something else entirely. He was a god who was worshipped and revered in the ancient world of Mesopotamia. I mean, just look at this transformation. It's night and day. On one side, you have Adrammelech, the magnificent king, a solar god who was honored with ceremonies involving fire. And on the other, the demon Adrammelech, great president of hell, who demands child sacrifice. It's a complete 180-degree, terrifying inversion. The original deity Adrammelech was a big deal. We're talking about a mighty solar and storm god. We have cuneiform tablets and inscriptions showing he was worshipped in places like Sepharvaim, a city that was famous for its incredible sun temple. He was a god of kings, a god of victory, a symbol of power and glory, not a monster. So how does a god of royal power become a child-killing demon? That's the million-dollar question, right? Well, it turns out it's a slow, deliberate process of monster making that unfolds over hundreds and hundreds of years. This transformation didn't just happen overnight. You can actually trace it. Around 900 BCE, he's a venerated god. Then, around 700 BCE, you get that biblical text linking his name to sacrifice. Fast forward 1,000 years or so to the medieval period, and boom, he has a full demonic profile. Then that gets written down in magical texts, the grimoires, and finally, he gets a whole new life as a symbol in the modern era. What's really telling is when you look at his medieval demon file. Look at the associations: solar magic, fire, gold, precious metals. Even in his twisted demonic form, you can still see the echoes of his original identity as a brilliant sun god. And the peacock, a classic solar symbol across many cultures, becomes his main identifier. It's like a ghost of who he used to be. And you can't talk about this without mentioning the early Christian theologians. Thinkers like Jerome and Augustine, they didn't just see the old pagan gods as false stories. No, they saw them as actual demons in disguise, actively tricking humanity. So a figure like Adrammelech, with his fiery rituals, he was a perfect candidate for this demonic rebranding. So where does all this leave Adrammelech today? Is he just a footnote in some dusty old books? Oh, not at all. Let's dig into how this ancient figure has been reimagined as a really powerful modern archetype. This quote here from the 19th century occultist Eliphas Levi, it absolutely nails the modern symbolic view. Adrammelech becomes a metaphor for divine light, or any great, powerful idea really, that gets twisted and becomes destructive. He represents the incredible danger of having power without wisdom. From a psychological angle, Adrammelech starts to look a lot like a mirror for our own inner shadows. He's the symbol for that spiritual pride that pretends to be enlightenment. He's the authority figure that consumes instead of protects. He's that brilliant creativity that gets corrupted by ego and leads to total ruin. He's the dark side of our own ambition. And in some modern esoteric paths, especially those that go down the so-called left-hand path, he's actually seen as a symbol of radical self-empowerment. It's this idea of becoming like a god by tearing down the moral rules that hold society together. A very seductive and very dangerous idea. Here's the kicker. Adrammelech's story isn't a one-off, not even close. It actually reveals a repeatable pattern, a kind of god-to-demon pipeline that we see again and again throughout history. It's basically a blueprint for how to turn your enemy's god into a monster. And it breaks down into about 4 steps. First, you have inversion. You take a rival's god and just flip them into a demon. Second, transmission. You spread that story through your holy books and your folklore. Third, preservation. You remember their original rituals, like fire worship, but you reframe them as something evil. And finally, persistence. The original symbols, like the sun, they stick around, but now they represent a corrupted version of their old glory. And all of this leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought, one that sort of reframes everything we think we know about demons. How many of the figures in our hells, in our grimoires, how many of them are not some primordial evil, but are simply the lost and demonized gods of a culture that lost a war? It's a question that really challenges us to look past the monstrous mask and see the hidden history buried underneath. Thanks for joining us.